Welcome. We are in list 7 in a series to review rhetorical devices you might see in speeches and readings that you come across. Now, these lists are meant to help with questions on college level tests, both multiple choice rhetorical analysis questions, and if you have to analyze a piece of writing for like a rhetorical analysis essay. You should be aware of rhetorical devices and how they function so that you can better kind of figure out and dissect how an author is putting together an argument. Do want to say, remember that just knowing and identifying rhetorical devices doesn't guarantee or mean that you're going to get a good grade. The most important task is to identify the author's purpose for the audience, then talk about how rhetorical devices or rhetorical choices help achieve that purpose. You can still get a good score without specifically just naming a bunch of rhetorical devices, but you do have to focus on what the writing is doing to help an author achieve the purpose. At the very least, these lists are going to give you an idea of the uses and functions of a lot of rhetorical devices so you can see how the author is using language to argue a point. So because there are so many terms, I grouped them around common functions to hopefully make a little more sense of how they're used rhetorically. I'm calling list 7 Pushing the Limits to talk about devices that somehow go outside of civil discourse. You know, it might be a logical fallacy or extreme language, overstatement, exaggeration, issues of that nature. Often these kinds of rhetorical language indicate more of a reliance on pathos, playing on the emotions. So they're handy to know, especially when possibly pointing out the weakness of an argument or an author's rhetoric, to see how an author is trying to evoke or pull emotion out of his or her audience. Now, I'm not saying these are always an indicator of weak or faulty logic or weak rhetoric, but you should exercise caution when you see these being used. So let's step right in and talk about pushing the limit. Number 81 is ad hominem. Ad hominem is an attack on someone's opponent rather than the opponent's actual argument. There's a couple ways to go about this. One could be to attack someone's personal traits or decisions, such as, we need someone who's committed no matter what. And with this divorce, how much of a commitment does this person have? Ad hominem could also point out someone's hypocrisy, such as, how much of an advocate can he or she be for healthy eating when seen out eating a double cheeseburger? Or it could be guilt by association, which is linking someone to someone else that's unpopular or holds an unpopular stance, so it seems like they're aligned or on the same page. The goal here is to invalidate someone's argument by belittling or defaming the person rather than engaging or discussing what the person is actually saying. Number 82 is anachronism. An anachronism is a placement of an event, a person, or a thing out of its proper place in time, whether it's purposeful or not. So for instance, in Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, two characters are talking about a clock striking the hour when there were no mechanical clocks when the play is supposed to be set. Some examples of anachronism may be harmless or inconsequential, like a coffee cup in a scene where it shouldn't be. But slang terms are sometimes brought into a situation where they haven't existed. But consider the damage, like historical situations being twisted to give people wrong information or a distorted view of actual events. And that way, anachronism could misinform people, and it could kind of damage the way they see a historical person or event as well. So you have to be careful. Number 83 is AUXESIS. AUXESIS is a growing exaggeration, often in a sequence of intensity. So someone might say, you found my wallet? You're a pal, you're a hero, you're a prince, you're a god. Right? You can see this example went from mild praise to quite an overblown extreme. AUXESIS can serve a purpose to give greater importance or emphasis, but it could also be skewed to play on the emotions. Think of someone saying something like, passing this law now will be a problem for our neighborhoods. It's going to be a burden on our courts. It's a blow to morality. It's a devastation to our children's future. So see how that escalated kind of quickly? Number 84 is BDELYGMIA with a silent B. BDELYGMIA is a rant or a string of insulting language, abusive language. It doesn't have to be curse words as a part of the list, but It can simply be meant to kind of slander or condemn a person or an idea or a belief or even a course of action. So think of the song about the Grinch who stole Christmas, which comes on the radio every year. That song is one long deligma about how bad the Grinch is. So sadly, you don't have to watch the news very long these days to find examples of politicians trashing their opponents with a list of nasty adjectives. They're employing deligmia. Number 85, BOMPHIOLOGIA is an excessive or over-the-top braggadocio. Now, I know I used a hard word to define a hard word, but you should know what braggadocio is as well, which means bragging or arrogance. So you can find examples of politicians or athletes or celebrities or rappers employing BOMPHIOLOGIA to try to paint themselves as superior or put themselves ahead or above others. So for BOMPHIOLOGIA to work, it has to be a facet of truth in there. So Muhammad Ali was a famous boxer and was known for hyping himself. You know, he wrote a humorous poem in his spoken word album called I Am the Greatest. You get an idea there that he was kind of inflating himself. However, BOMPHIOLOGIA can also leave a bad impression, right? Especially if a person is not well liked and is seen as excessively arrogant. In that case, it would backfire on them. Number 86 is catharsis. And this is an interesting word because it describes a kind of mental or emotional cleansing or release of unhealthy feelings. So it's supposed to be kind of a healing or stress-reducing moment because it purges the negative energy somebody might be holding on to. And it actually means cleansing in Greek. You might see a catharsis in a confession, someone admitting something, or a dramatic retelling of an event that's meant to get something off someone's chest. Or in a negative sense, it can be used, right? Someone might classify deligmia as a type of catharsis if it helps someone unload their anger or frustration about a person or a place or a thing. Why would an author include catharsis? Well, it might be a way to create sympathy with an audience, to draw them in. If there's a common foe the author or audience are both against, right, it could serve to kind of band them together more strongly against a person or an idea. So there's lots of uses to have catharsis in writing. Number 87 is hyperbole, and this is one that's probably a little more familiar to most people because it's often taught as a literary term, but hyperbole is an overstatement or exaggeration of facts. It can be used to exaggerate something's importance or its impact, or to put stress on a particular point an author is trying to make. Phrases like, I told you a million times, or it took forever to get our food, are typical examples of hyperbole that we hear all the time. So you can see how hyperbole can be used to play on emotions or distort the truth, and it's actually a common technique in propaganda. Number 88 is meiosis. Meiosis is a dismissive epithet. You're labeling someone or something negatively in order to dismiss it or negate its importance. But in this case, there's supposed to be an underlying humor to belittle the subject. An epithet is a descriptive word or phrase meant to capture the quality of someone or something, but that word epithet has some negative connotation because it's oftentimes paired with words like racial epithets. But meiosis isn't always a negative, or it's not always an attack per se. It can be used to downplay something, like your boss saying, we have a little problem for you to work on that actually might be a big deal. Some other examples of meiosis might be calling someone a tree hugger or a redneck, or calling a psychiatrist a shrink. So these terms have some wit or cleverness behind them, but they're meant to make someone's ideas about a topic seem less valid. Number 89 is red herring. A red herring is when an author brings up an irrelevant or unrelated issue in an effort to draw attention away from the real issue or argument. This comes from a practice when people would try to throw off hunting dogs off the trail by disrupting the scent, so they would drag a fish across the path, a red herring in one account, in order to lead them off the scent. So over time, it came to metaphorically symbolize the logical fallacy of using distractive arguments or topics to derail the focus of an argument. So we see this a lot in the news or in interviews, like when a politician is asked an uncomfortable question or that one they don't want to answer. And so their answer is basically speaking to a different subject. So in argument, it can be manipulative by taking an audience away from the real argument. Number 90 is tapinosis, and tapinosis is basically name calling, right? Trying to diminish some things or someone's importance. It's undignified slander against someone or something. It's like meiosis, but without the humor. It's meant to degrade or insult. So calling someone an idiot or a moron or worse are examples of tapinosis. If an author is seeking to wound or to slander or to be blunt and aggressive, even to communicate a degree of frustration or anger, tapinosis might be a technique that's used. The last one in this list is 91, grotesque. So the use of the grotesque, which means kind of gross or vulgar or overly descriptive in sometimes a negative way, is also the name of a literary genre that highlights bizarre or incongruous or ugly or unnatural or weird aspects of something. And an author can use grotesque imagery to be repulsive or to cause disgust about something, to kind of repel the audience. However, it can be used to cause sympathy or empathy, where an audience might feel sorry for someone or something, or at least come to a better understanding and have better insight about a person or a group or a situation. So you can see it really depends on how an author desires to impact or influence an audience into how much of the grotesque they will decide to include in a passage of writing. Well, that brings us to the end of list 7, pushing the limits, where we looked at some rhetorical devices that kind of go outside of civil, normal, everyday discussion and, sometimes pushes it. So hopefully that was helpful, and there are other lists in this series that it would be great for you to check out so you can get a handle on rhetorical devices. I appreciate you taking the time to check this out, and hopefully you found it helpful. It would be awesome if you could subscribe and tell people about the channel. Here is the playlist of the other rhetorical devices. Here's some writing workshops that I have put together that will help you, with some of the writing that you might be doing. And then here's just something for fun, because we all got to relax sometime. Check it out, please. Until next time.